Welcome to another edition of Just the Truth. Glad to have you join me in the PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition Studio to lose weight for the last time in 2024. Visit myphdweightloss.com. As expected, President Donald Trump appealed a ruling disqualifying him from Colorado's 2024 election ballot to the Supreme Court yesterday. We'll follow that story and give you the latest details on it. Another record month at the southern border. U.S. Customs and Border Protection encountered enough illegals trying to slip into our country to fill Michigan Stadium in Ann Arbor, Michigan, almost 3 times. Meanwhile, the Biden administration asked the Supreme Court this week to allow the Border Patrol to remove barbed wire installed along the Texas-Mexico border by Texas Governor Greg Abbot. And the resignation of Harvard University's president, Claudine Gay, has directed some unwanted attention on the school and the academic world in general, I guess you could say. The question many are asking, will this change the leftist-leaning woke world of higher education? FoxNews.com published an interesting editorial on this. I'll share that with you in just a moment. And while we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because that's what the Harvard situation is all about, we all know the only reason Karine Jean-Pierre is the White House press secretary is because of the color of her skin and her sexual preference. And boy, KJP has really outdone herself this time. You have to give her credit for creativity because she was really reaching yesterday when she blamed the record $34 trillion national debt on GOP tax cuts. Stick around. You're going to love this one.
I told you we'd be back.
And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
It's Joey Hudson.
On our guest line this morning, Senator Tim Scott.
Thank you for listening to one of the best radio shows. Joey, God bless your leadership.
Joey, congratulations on your new show.
I just wanted to let you know that I always appreciate your perspective and your common sense approach to the issues.
You know what? If people like you keep telling us the truth, believe me, we're paying close attention.
Let your voice be heard.
And the truth shall set you free.
Here's Joey Hudson.
No big surprise yesterday. President Donald Trump appealed a ruling disqualifying him from Colorado's 2024 election ballot to the Supreme Court yesterday. The Colorado Supreme Court ruled 4-3 back in December that Trump is ineligible to be on the state's primary ballot under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Trump asked the Supreme Court yesterday to determine whether the court erred in excluding him. The petition states the question of eligibility to serve as President of the United States is properly reserved for Congress, not the state courts, to consider and decide. By considering the question of President Trump's eligibility and barring him from the ballot, the Colorado Supreme Court arrogated Congress's authority. The Colorado Republican Party had previously appealed the ruling back in December, putting the decision on hold and requiring Colorado Secretary of State Jena Griswold to include Trump's name on the ballot if the justices take no action by ballot certification deadline, which is actually tomorrow, January the 5th. The Colorado Supreme Court previously had put on hold its decision until today to allow time for Trump to appeal, acknowledging they traveled in what they called uncharted territory. Their opinion states, the sum of these parts is this: President Trump is disqualified from holding the office of president under Section 3 because he is disqualified, they argue. It would be a wrongful act under the election code for the secretary to list him as a candidate for the presidential ballot. Colorado Judge Sarah Wallace found in November that Trump was not a, quote, officer of the United States who could be disqualified under the 14th Amendment, though she concluded he had engaged in an insurrection on January the 6th, 2021, through incitement. In response to this, Trump spokesperson Stephen Chung said in a statement, "Crooked Joe Biden's comrades, including the Colorado Supreme Court and Crew, a radical left-wing activist group, are doing all they can do to disenfranchise all American voters by attempting to remove President Trump, the leading candidate in the 2024 presidential election, from the primary ballot. Democrats are obsessively violating the American voters' constitutional right to vote for the candidate of their choice. This is an un-American, unconstitutional act of election interference which cannot stand." The Supreme Court rejected in October the appeal of the little-known 2024 Republican presidential candidate John Anthony Castro's bid, who was trying to remove Trump from the ballot in Florida after a lower court judge found that he lacked standing to sue. Castro has brought other lawsuits in other states, including in Arizona and Rhode Island, where they've been similarly shot down by federal judges. Also last week, you will recall, Maine Secretary of State Shenna Bellows issued a similar ruling disqualifying Trump from the state's ballot under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. President Trump filed an appeal of that ruling with the Maine court on Tuesday of this week. 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Your text messages are welcome on the Truth text line, as well as your voice messages. Leave me a quick voice message, and we'll air them as we have time. Of course, your emails are always welcome, joey@joeyhudson.com. So Harvard and their disgraced president has been in the headlines for weeks now. And in an opinion piece written by Jarrett Stepman, a Daily Signal columnist and published on Fox News, summed the situation up pretty good, I think. And it reads like this. Harvard's embattled president resigned on Tuesday, but it would be a mistake to think that the school's or higher education's troubles are over. Harvard President Claudine Gay's disastrous testimony and serial blatant plagiarism were certainly good reasons to give her the boot. The Harvard Corporation Board, which decides who will be president of the school, never took that route. That's a good point, isn't it? They did not. They allowed her to stay on. She resigned. It goes on to read, instead, Gay bowed out on her own and wrote a letter demonstrating no contrition for her embarrassing December 5th congressional testimony about anti-Semitism on college campuses. She even insinuated that the reason she was getting criticized was racism. She wrote in her resignation statement, "It has been distressing to have doubt cast on my commitments to confronting hate and to upholding scholarly rigor, two bedrock values that are fundamental to who I am, and frightening to be subjected to personal attacks and threats fueled by racial animus." Gay completely dodged the serious accusations made against her, in particular the inexcusable plagiarism that seems to be a hallmark of her career. He goes on to write, the widespread plagiarism issue is even more impressive when you consider that Gay has a remarkably thin academic record in general. She published 10 journal articles and no books in over 2 decades, he says. Apparently, pointing out that someone with such a dubious academic record shouldn't be leading one of the most prestigious academic institutions in the world is an example of racial animus. So why was Gay made the president of Harvard to begin with? And why did she have such firm support at the school? It's a good question, isn't it? The answer is that she was brought in to demonstrate and to double down on the school's absolute commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let me interpret that for you. She's black and she's a female. As journalist Christopher Rufo wrote, Gay built a DEI empire at Harvard even before becoming president of the school. She oversaw the school's racially discriminatory admissions program. She created a task force for renaming buildings and carrying out the Cultural Revolution in the wake of the racial reckoning of 2020. He goes on to write, she was there to ensure that the entire bureaucratic apparatus of the school was firmly committed to promoting DEI to the exclusion of almost anything else. Despite the Supreme Court's invalidation of the school's racist admissions process, that bureaucracy is still in place, still carrying out Gay's initiatives, whether she is running them or not. Don't forget, it's DEI ideology that created the storm of criticism to begin with. It's an ideology that ultimately boils the world down into a collective struggle between oppressors and oppressed, where social justice means ultimately overturning Western notions of individual justice, responsibility, and right and wrong. He writes, after the Hamas massacre of the Israelis on October 7th became clear that the ideology of DEI excused open season hatred towards Jews, Israel, and the West. Gay and other college presidents tried to dodge that reality at the anti-Semitism hearing. After all, most Americans actually do find that simply hating people for what they are to be abhorrent. But even in their attempt to gloss over the attitudes of the left's angry activist class, they couldn't fully spin this into the usual narrative that the problem is white supremacy and America's history of systemic racism and bigotry. The hate spewing from their supporters was too blatant this time. The DEI mask has slipped. He goes on to write, what's been revealed is an entire elite ecosystem dedicated to its ideological prerogatives. When White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said on Tuesday that President Joe Biden has always put equity at the center of every policy he's put forward, this is what she's referring to. So the end of Gay's short-lived tenure as head of America's oldest university is the beginning, if not the conclusion, of the problems facing Harvard and our nation's elite schools. The problem primarily being that our elite universities and institutions have been turned away from the core functions they were founded on. No longer are they committed to creating educated and patriotic leaders who seek the truth and strengthen their nation's commitment to the Constitution and a free society. That was the vision of James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, and other men that they have been eagerly tearing down, in many cases, literally. They've instead been commandeered for the purpose of reproducing an ideological conformist ruling class that carries out the political projects of the left in academia, business, and government. He writes, they built up an enormous, well-funded, publicly funded apparatus that carries out the agenda no matter who's in charge. The donor exodus can't happen soon enough, and neither can the democratic pressure on these schools to reform. The idea of viewpoint diversity at Harvard or any other Ivy League school is a farce. The problem has gotten worse over the past half century and not better. Gay's departure changes nothing on that front. She isn't even leaving the school, he writes, just going back to being another member of the faculty. The bottom line is that the DEI regime won't go down without a struggle, and it's willing to bring down the whole system when threatened. This isn't just a matter of money or who holds what position. It's a matter of power and who decides what the American people think and are allowed to do or not do. They want cultural revolution, nothing less. The institutions won't reform themselves. This problem can only be solved by the American people. We have a lot of work to do. And he's right. He is so right. We do have a lot of work to do. By the way, speaking of Claudine Gay, and he's right, she will just go back to teaching. She's not leaving the university. She wasn't fired, which she should have been. And records show that Gay previously earned $879,000 as a Faculty of Arts and Sciences Dean in 2021 and $824,000 in 2020, and it appears she'll continue to be paid somewhere in that range. Being paid over $800,000 to a professor who has plagiarized over her entire academic career? What is wrong with that? 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Love to get your comments on the Truth text line. Should Claudine Gay be allowed to keep her teaching job? Should she be paid over $800,000 now that we know that she is that she plagiarizes? That's just common practice for her? You can email me as well, joey@joeyhudson.com. Another record month at the southern border. U.S. Customs and Border Protection encountered enough illegals trying to slip into our country to fill Michigan Stadium in Ann Arbor almost 3 times. The stadium, affectionately known as the Big House, has a capacity of 107,601 and is the largest football stadium in America. You do the math. Let me tell you about PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition. Was getting healthy and losing weight one of your New Year's resolutions? Let's talk about emotional eating. You know, I used to be a chocoholic. I've told you this story before. I love chocolate, but I've learned not to use it as a crutch to deal with stress or other issues, eating it just to be eating it. I changed my relationship with chocolate 3 years ago to help with the help of the team at PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition. That's when I first met Dr. Ashley Lucas and her team at PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition. And boy, I got to tell you, that was the best call I ever made because I lost 30 pounds pretty quickly, and over 3 years later, I've been able to maintain it. They'll help you get healthy and get to your right weight as well. Call today, set up your initial consultation, 864-252-4925, 864-252-4925. You can always find them online as well at PhDweightloss.com. That's PhDweightloss.com. Let's make 2024 your best year. Let's make it your healthiest year. Let's get that fat, that visceral fat that's so dangerous around your waist. Let's get it off this year. Call them today, 864-252-4925. PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition, the official partner of the Clemson Tigers. So U.S. border agents encountered a record monthly number of illegal aliens at the southern border in December again. I feel like a broken record because every month I tell you this, that they've broken the record again. It's because they just keep letting these people flood into our nation. U.S. Customs and Border Protection, they encountered more than 302,000 illegal immigrants at or between ports of entry during the last month of 2023, during December, during the Christmas holiday. Enough to fill Michigan Stadium. That's pretty wild, isn't it? 3 times. Border Patrol agents encountered more than 249,000 illegals between the ports of entry in December, an additional 52,000 at a port along the southern border. News Nation border correspondent Allie Bradley wrote on X, citing CBP sources. In November, Customs and Border Protection said that agents encountered just over 242,000 illegal aliens at the southern border. The Tucson sector of Arizona, which covers 262 miles along the border, saw the largest number of encounters in December at over 80,000. CBP wasn't expected to release the December numbers until later this month. The new numbers on illegal aliens encountered at the southern border come while Congress is still working to agree on a border security bill. You may recall last year the Republican-led House passed a bill, H.R. 2, but the Democrat-led Senate has not taken it up. Representative Bob Good, a Republican from Virginia, who is the new chairman of the conservative House Freedom Caucus, told the Daily Signal during a recent podcast interview that improving border security under President Joe Biden is among Republicans' highest priorities for 2024. He said, of the many crises that the president and these Democrats have created that the country is suffering under now, our weakened military, our war on affordable, reliable energy, the climate, environmental extremism, the massive spending that's bankrupting us and crushing us with record inflation, the assault on our education system. There are so many issues that are just challenging, and in and of themselves, you could argue are serious crisis. He said, perhaps, though, the border, to your question, may be the greatest issue, the greatest crisis of all. Democrats in Congress and the White House call for more U.S. aid for Ukraine. Republicans have made it very clear that they won't consider additional aid without legislation to address the record number of illegals arriving at our border and being paroled into the U.S. under the Biden administration. They're just turned loose to go wherever they want to. They're given a free bus ticket or a free plane ticket to go anywhere they want to, with the idea that they'll report at some future date. You and I both know that's never going to happen. Yesterday, House Speaker Mike Johnson led a delegation of Republican lawmakers to the southern border, trying to highlight the party's prioritization of border security. About 60 GOP lawmakers, we're told, were expected to join Johnson on the trip to Eagle Pass, Texas, including Homeland Security Chairman Mark Green from Tennessee and House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan from Ohio. In a letter to Biden before Christmas, Speaker Johnson urged the president to resume border wall construction, end parole programs that release illegals into the U.S. interior, and re-implement the Trump administration's Remain in Mexico policy. Last week, while Biden was vacationing in the U.S. Virgin Islands, Johnson wrote on X, President Biden needs to stop vacationing and take immediate steps to stop the flow of illegal immigration into our country. Our nation's security and sovereignty depend upon it, and the American people demand it. Meanwhile, the Biden administration asked the Supreme Court this week to allow the Border Patrol to remove the barbed wire fencing that was installed along the Texas-Mexico border by Texas officials. You may recall that Texas Governor Greg Abbott this past year had his agents put the stranded barbed wire across the border. And you immediately had the Democrats complaining that it could hurt someone. Well, that's the idea, is to keep people on the other side of it. It's not going to hurt you unless you try to come through it, right? The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals last month issued an order blocking the Biden administration from removing the wire while it considers the appeal from the state of Texas. The Department of Homeland Security asked the Supreme Court in an emergency application on Tuesday of this week to freeze the order, arguing that federal law grants agents authority to access private lands near the border. Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar wrote in the Supreme Court filing, like other law enforcement officers, Border Patrol agents operating under difficult circumstances at the border must make context-dependent, sometimes split-second decisions about how to enforce federal immigration laws while maintaining public safety. She added, but the injunction prohibits agents from passing through or moving physical obstacles erected by the state that prevent access to the very border they're charged with patrolling and the individuals they're charged with apprehending and inspecting. She doesn't mention the fact that if you'll keep the wire there, it'll keep them on the other side of it, and agents won't need to try to apprehend them. They'll stay over there. Texas, as you probably remember, sued the Biden administration for initially cutting the wire, which Texas Governor Greg Abbot had instructed local authorities to place on the border back in October in response to the surge of illegal crossings. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton said at the time that the state has the sovereign right to construct border barriers to prevent the entry of illegal aliens. Many of you have been saying that all along, haven't you? I mean, that's the most common response I get is, hey, why don't the states just start ignoring Joe Biden and doing what they have to do with their National Guard, with their local law enforcement to protect their sovereignty, thus protecting our nation's sovereignty. The Fifth Circuit ruled in December that Texas must move a buoy barrier. Remember the floating barrier they put in the middle of the Rio Grande? They did have to remove that as a result of the federal court's ruling. You have to wonder sometimes what these judges are thinking about, whether or not they have my safety, your safety in their minds. On the Truth text line, Tony wrote, God forbid the quitter get elected, of which I don't think she will. She'll have us in never-ending wars to enrich her pockets with government contracts. I'm assuming Tony is talking about former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. Jeff writes, good morning. It was nice to hear JR this morning. It's been a while. Thanks for everything you do. We need more like you to tell the truth. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate you listening. It was good to hear JR from Westminster. He was a frequent caller to the Morning Answer, and it was great to hear him. You can leave a message as well. All you have to do is call 864-477-5639, 864-477-JOEY. I love to get your voice messages, and I'll air some here on Just the Truth as time permits. Ray writes, the president of Harvard is fired and continues to be paid over $900K. Jimbo Fisher is fired as a coach at Texas A&M and is paid $75 million. Please, someone fire me. I need the money. Hey, Ray, you and I both, buddy. I'm trying to get fired every day if somebody's going to pay me like that. I mean, think about that, Coach. I mean, it's bad enough that the Harvard president gets to remain a teacher there and paid close to $900,000. But have you ever had a coach to be paid $75 million just to go away? Wow. Ace writes, Joey, I'm going to try to have a better attitude toward the world's stage in 2024. Well, you know, Ace, we all could probably try to have a little better attitude, couldn't we? Our text of encouragement today reads, today is one of its kind. It won't come again. Bring joy to someone, speak good words, and use them to heal, encourage others, and learn to care. God bless. Thank you for that. Again, your text is welcome, 864-477-5639. I had someone tag me in a post on Facebook, and it has this was a reporting from Fox News. Evidently, Greenville, South Carolina, is number 8 in the United States of having FedEx packages, and I would imagine any packages. This message cites FedEx packages, but is number 8 of having packages stolen from your front porch. Cities with the worst package theft: number 1, Seattle, Tacoma, and Washington; Memphis, Tennessee; San Diego, Birmingham, Alabama; Denver, Colorado; Richmond, Virginia; Austin, Texas; Greenville, Anderson, South Carolina is number 8; number 9, Grand Rapids; and number 10, Portland on the list. That's one list that we don't want people saying, yeah, that Greenville for sure. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre has really outdone herself this time. You know, you have to give her credit for her creativity, because she was really reaching yesterday when she blamed the record $34 trillion national debt that we just reached. She blamed that debt on GOP tax cuts. Stick around. You're going to love this one. Let me tell you about my friends at Discounted Appliance Warehouse. Are you looking for a new appliance? You need a new refrigerator, new dishwasher, washer, dryer? When you need those appliances, first off, you want to get the best deal on one, right? You want the one that's right for you and your family. But there's so many options. That's why you need someone who has the knowledge to help you make the right decision. And that's Jeff and his team at Discounted Appliance Warehouse. They have an A-plus Better Business Bureau rating, nearly perfect reviews on Google, and the team at Discounted Appliance Warehouse, they have the knowledge you need to have confidence in the purchase that you make. They'll show you around the warehouse where they have over 1,500 appliances where you can buy it today and quite often use it today as well. They have an award-winning service department, extended warranties. They take care of you well after the sale at Discounted Appliance Warehouse. They're located in Pickens and online at dawpickens.com, dawpickens.com. So the Biden administration spared no time in attempting to shift the blame towards Republicans over our national debt reaching a historic high of $34 trillion this week, despite President Biden having been in office for nearly 3 full years now. Despite the new record high, when asked, Jean-Pierre argued that Biden had taken action to lower the debt. Really, now, stay with me here, because she really reached on this one. When she was asked, Jean-Pierre argued that Biden had taken a lot of necessary actions to lower the debt, including signing the Inflation Reduction Act. We all know it had nothing to do with inflation. It spent more money, which some experts predicted would actually cost the U.S. more than originally projected. And she said cracking down on wealthy tax cheats through actions like growing the IRS. Fox Business reporter Edward Lawrence pressed Jean-Pierre on her claims, noting that the length of time Biden has already been in office, as well as that the U.S. had added $10 billion per day to the national debt since Biden had been in office. She doubled down. Here's the exchange.
Any reaction to the new data out of Treasury that the national debt has hit a record $34 trillion?
So if you look at that data, it's a there's a trickle down debt. If you think about it, Republican tax cuts are responsible for about 90% of it, of the increase in the debt as a share of the economy over the last 2 decades, excluding emergency spending. And so, as we know, you've heard me say this, you've heard the president speak to this, of what he has done to certainly lower the debt. He signed a legislation to lower the deficit by $1 trillion. Right? When you think about the Inflation Reduction Act, that's going to lower prescription drug costs and cracking down on the wealth tax cheats that we've seen. And then his agenda would cut the deficit another $2.5 trillion by making the wealthy pay their fair share. So that is what the president has done. What we've seen on the other side is the complete opposite. What they've tried to do is continue to give a tax break to the millionaires and the billionaires, and that what they have actually put forward would add more than $3 trillion to the debt. So that's what that data shows us, and that's what we have done to try to make sure. The president has been very, very deliberate about this to make sure that we do everything we can to certainly deal with the debt.
So I heard you blame the Republicans for the federal debt, but President Biden has been in office for 35 months, and over the past 3 months, the U.S. has added $10 billion per day to the federal debt. So, and that's not turning around. So is there a discussion here about cutting spending then?
Republican tax cuts are responsible for 90%. 90% of the increase in the debt. 90%. That is something that Republicans are responsible for. What the president has done, and you've heard us talk about it, I just talked about this, he's put forth legislation like lowering the deficit by $1 trillion. And that's part of the lowering prescription drug costs and cracking down on the wealthy tax cheats. That's what he's done. $1.5 trillion, again, another way to lower the deficit, and that is through wasteful spending on special interests like Big Pharma. The president beat Big Pharma. That's what he was able to do last year because of the policies that he has put forth. And meanwhile, you know what? The GOP, or congressional Republicans, what they want to do is they want to continue with their Maganomics. What they've proposed will add $3 trillion to the debt. That's the numbers. You're a data guy. That's the numbers. That's what we have seen.
Is she really that dumb? First off, what does Big Pharma have to do with our national debt? And I wonder what Big Pharma thinks about Jean-Pierre saying that Biden had beaten Big Pharma. I don't think Biden has beaten Big Pharma. Have you ever noticed how she always cites the reduction in prescription drug cost? I don't know if it's true or not, but even if it is, what does lower drug prices, and I hope that's correct, because I don't think we need to be paying more for our prescriptions, and certainly senior citizens. We need any help we can get. But what does that have to do with the national debt breaking an all-time high? And what she's really saying is that you and I aren't paying enough taxes, that we need to be sending more of our hard-earned money to D.C. so she and her Democrat cronies can spend it. I mean, when I sit and watch her, I'm in amazement at sometimes. I just can't believe how stupid she really is. And I hate to use that word. I probably shouldn't, but the woman is just stupid. She makes no sense whatsoever, and how she can even with a straight face stand there and try to argue that GOP tax cuts, and what she really means is Trump tax cuts, that they're responsible for the national debt reaching an all-time high, and she doesn't want to talk about some of the Biden spending plans. Last year, Biden was scrutinized by several liberal fact-checkers for claiming that his administration had reduced the budget deficit by $1.7 billion, which is a critical step in lowering the national debt. Some called the claim misleading and lacking context. Although Biden was kind of correct at the time that the annual federal deficit had decreased from $3.1 trillion in fiscal year 2020 to $1.4 trillion in fiscal year 2022, translating to a $1.7 trillion drop overall. The fact checkers noted that Biden's fiscal policies were hardly the lone or leading factor in driving down the deficit in those 2 years. Biden has repeated the same claim on numerous other occasions, even throughout 2023. In May, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office revealed that the federal government under Biden had run a near $1 trillion federal deficit in the first 7 months of fiscal year 2023. It found that in these months alone, the federal government had racked up $928 trillion. And she wants to stand there and talk about, well, he saved you money with your prescription drugs. He beat Big Pharma. and boy, those nasty old tax cuts that Donald Trump put in place that saved corporations and businesses, big, and the wealthy Americans, saved them tax dollars. A lot of that, they like to say that it only affected the wealthy. But do you feel like you're paying more taxes than you've ever spent? I mean, we're taxed in every direction. Income taxes, Some states have income taxes. We certainly do in South Carolina. The gas tax has gone up. Our property taxes has gone up. It's just amazing to me. According to the Associated Press, the ballooning of the national debt in recent years was, in fact, accelerated by heavy borrowing under Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump's spending during the COVID-19 pandemic. And look, I'll have to admit, the Trump administration, they did spend too much, but they were reacting to a pandemic, a situation that none of us had ever been in before. You add all that spending up, and we have the inflation that we have had to live through over this past year. Big Pharma. Joe Biden has beaten Big Pharma. Your prescription drug prices are down. Wow. We all know why Jean-Pierre is in the job she's in. Again, I'll repeat myself. She's black, and her sexual preference is what the left applaud. That's it for today's edition of Just the Truth. Hey, thank you for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition Studio to lose the weight for the last time in 2024. Visit myphdweightloss.com. Hey, if you haven't joined my mailing list, visit my website, joeyhudson.com. Click on the Connect with Joey button. Do it right now before you forget it so you can receive our emails with the most up-to-date news. Appreciate you spending a few minutes of your day with me. Keep those text messages coming on the Truth text line, 864-477-5639. And your emails, keep those coming in as well, joey@joeyhudson.com. Have a great rest of your day. We're back again tomorrow. Until then, remember, folks, God's got this. He's still in control.